footage where Kurtz has a set list taped to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had just come back from a Cyclops rehearsal.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's Ben and I were both there.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my understanding is this goes on for somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks. I think the Eagles Hall performance lands somewhere in there.
It does. It does.
And,
That sounds about right.
Okay.
To me.
Yeah.
And we would talk about these things. Well, what are you going to do? Be that show? Yeah, I'll do that show. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think the way Nirvana looked at it was another chance to rehearse.
Right. Yeah.
And they were, in hindsight, it's easy to see the parts and pieces lining up a little better.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, you're just sort of, living reflexively.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, no, I got something to do. And then it doesn't happen. And that changes the course of history.
Mm-hmm.
That could have easily happened. The thing where Chris had a van that he got from the Root Paint Company,
Mm-hmm.
basically given, to him with making like $200 a month payments or something like that.
Okay.
See, he was later working for Root. It's like when he went down to Phoenix, I didn't really know that he had ever worked for Foster's Paint Company.
Mm.
What he told me when he was in Phoenix was he had done some painting with Dwight. Now maybe that was, I knew Dwight who lived out North River. I met him before they went down there. And because I was like a floor covering guy and saying, there's a paint crew where we have a contract to put floor covering down. You come to work with me. What were you doing when you left Grays Harbor? You were painting? Okay, you're a painter. Come with me, I'll introduce you to the paint crew. Went down there, introduced him, got a job that day with the paint crew.
Right.
In those days he was driving the Zebra van. When the show for the Hoquiam Eagles, they already had the Root Paint Company. When he came back, he went to work for, I can't think of his first name, but, I almost had it. Anyway, the Root Paint Company in Hoquiam,
Mm-hmm.
and that's who he was working for, Fred.
Okay.
And so apparently Fred really liked Chris and said, I support what you're doing with the band. You need a van. Just don't wreck it and make payments. And I don't even know if he had the title in his name or not.
And it was called the Zebra van because of a paint job? Or?
Well, the Volkswagen, so those are two different vans. They're both white, but the Zebra van he sold to Bob Shorts, foreign engine repair out on the Westport Highway there, just past, what was that? It's actually the Eagles now. It used to be, I think, but out like you're going to just leave South Side heading towards Westport.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when the vehicle that Chris and Shelley drove to Phoenix and back, and also did a tour with the Melvins, was this Volkswagen van that was painted like a zebra.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I've seen a picture of that. Yeah.
Well, if you have, get a copy because it's really, really rare.
Okay.
I don't know of any photographs of that van.
Okay. I could be wrong. I'll have to go back and dig. But so let's talk
The
about
Root van, the paint van, was a Dodge, I believe, and it was a completely different van. It was white, just pure white.
Yeah, I know that I'm pretty sure I've seen a picture of them. In
That's the one that they went on
Volkswagen
tour
van.
with Jason Everman.
Oh, okay.
And I said, no, they wanted me to go with them in 1989, and I said, no, thank you. I'm going to get married.
Was this in '89? Was this the first because they did like a 2-week, a really fast tour down, a couple shows down in California, I think San Jose.
Yeah,
So
they
that
did that,
was
and I didn't go for that either.
And Bruce and Jonathan went along on
Yes,
that one.
they did.
Yeah. yeah.
Yeah,
Did they ride down in the van, or did they have their?
I don't know. I wasn't involved with it.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, one of the things that, I mean, Kurt was sending me a little bit mixed messages. Partly because he was trying to encourage me to pursue what I was saying I wanted to do with my life, which was to be a musician just like him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all he wanted to do. And I had other ambitions.
Mm-hmm.
He had no other ambitions.
Yeah.
And that's where he and I disagreed about things.
Okay.
And so, like, I remember one time he needed me to give him a lift from the B Street apartment over to the post office or something, because he heard there was a letter there, or he wanted to mail a letter to Jesse Reed, one of his friends,
Sure.
who had recently joined the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And
This was right after they were living at the apartment on Michigan and 3rd, I believe. I've heard it called the Pink Apartment or the Big Wheelhouse.
yeah, I don't know. That
Okay.
probably wasn't during the time that I was there.
It was right, I believe the timeline, if I have it right, was he had that apartment with Jesse Reed.
Yeah.
There was a falling out, but it was just shortly before he was ready to head out to join the Navy anyway.
Well, and Jesse married Ray Maldonado's daughter. I can't think of her name right at the moment. And I actually went to the wedding reception and with Kurt and Jesse.
Oh, wow.
And that was out on, what's that community just east of Montesano?
Elmo?
No, or west. It's
Brady?
pardon me?
Brady?
No. It's a suburb right here on Wainuchi Valley. It's a development there.
Okay.
That's where it was.
Okay.
At Ray's house there, and I think, and that's where I met Jesse. And like he was leaving for the Navy the very next day.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since you brought up Jesse, this just kind of like triggered a thought in my head. We know for a while Kurt lived with the Reed family until there was an incident, and then he ends up moving out, I believe, with Jesse's grandparents, both of them for a short term, and then to the house on Michigan, or apartment on Michigan Street.
Okay.
At some point in time, Kurt was attending, I believe it was like a youth group. I think it was a Baptist church on the south side with, I believe, Jesse, and I believe even Chris had gone to some of the meetings or whatever they were having for this youth group, because I don't know if he was dating or was interested in a girl that attended church there. Do you know much about that period of time?
I know nothing about that.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the first I've actually heard of it, actually.
Okay.
But it doesn't surprise me. I mean, it's the kind of thing that I am guilty of doing myself. You know, I mean, that was like the one thing you could get me to do is say that there was a female that might be interested in me. You know, it's like, well, tell me where to stand.
Yeah.
And if it's not too painful, I'll stay as long as I can.
Yeah.
You know, and
Okay.
but I don't know anything about that.
Let's talk a little bit about vinyl, and let's talk a little bit about some of the history, or I guess some consequential things happening in Aberdeen. Now, at the time, I understand, and I'm not from this area, so I can't really vouch for what was or wasn't happening, but my understanding was if you wanted to go out and you wanted to buy records that were punk music, good luck in Aberdeen, right?
Yeah, you could. Well, when Rich Corset owned Bilbo Baggins, depending on how friendly you were with him, you know, and Rich and I became good friends. He ended up being a landlord for me. I was a carpet layer. I ended up doing a lot of work for him. it was kind of a barter system, you know. But I knew Rich from before when I was going to school at Hopkins Junior High School. It was an open campus. And so, you know, one of the things that I would do is I would go over to the record store, which used to be pretty close to, right on the other side of Swanson's over there. I think it's like a Latino grocery store or something now.
Okay.
But, and I would order like really rare AC/DC imports or Judas Priest imports, and you would wait, you know, 6 weeks to get them or whatever. So you'd certainly do that if you wanted to, but really the only thing that was later 80s was Rainy Days in Olympia, second time around in Tacoma, or Fallout Records on Olive Way in Seattle.
Right.
And Cellophane Square.
You were
in the
not
U
going to
District.
find anything on the shelf. It's not something that anybody was stocking here in Aberdeen.
No.
It was the story that I
No.
got. But, and of course, and you've probably heard the story that Chris talks about where he, when he moves here from Southern California, I guess there's one place that he actually likes to shop at in Aberdeen, and it's Dill's Secondhand.
Oh yeah,
That's
well
where-
you could find just about anything in there.
Just about.
Yeah.
And that's where
Actually, that's where he got his Meat Puppets 2 record.
Oh, there was a Meat Puppets record there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and which I was just, I'm still blown away to this day. You know,
Yeah. That's the first time I heard that
Yeah.
about the.
he got it there for
okay.
a buck.
For $1, which is
Yeah.
what he paid
For
for
everything.
Shocking Blue.
Yep.
Yep. And of course, you know, consequential because it had Love Buzz on it.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now later on, just to jump forward a bit, there's an interview, and I can't remember who the interviewer was, but Kurt was doing an interview, and it's on, I believe it's on video, where he's got all of his albums kind of lined up on the wall, and he's going through and he's taking out albums, and he's talking about, oh yeah, this is a great band, and he talks about the one album that he really has something significant to say anything about is the Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bollocks, right? And he talks about how this was the most well-produced record that he's ever listened to, which interesting. Obviously you've listened to it, but the one thing he mentions is that he interrupts himself and he says, "I found this in Aberdeen." And so that's kind of surprising too, So we've got the Meat Puppets gets found at Dill's, I'm just curious if, did he ever mention anything about that album?
I actually don't recall that. I had those conversations with him all the time because I was hungry for this, and I would borrow. That was one of the things that I would do, is I would borrow, particularly from Matt and Kurt, and Chris, we would borrow each other's records and then bring them back.
Sure.
And you would tape them. Sometimes you would make a mixtape for someone else. And Shelley certainly did that for me. And then Kurt's girlfriend, Tracy Miranda, she did that for me a couple times. And Kurt had a bunch of Tracy's albums over there too. And so, but sometimes I would just go through the record and pile and take one out, ask them, and they would say, "Oh, no, don't do that one, do this other one," and then go home, listen to it. If I liked it, I'd record it, bring it back, and just do that over and over and over again. And so, that was one of the ways. I mean, that was like the YouTube of today, where you would discuss it. You would say, "Let me write that down somewhere," and then you would do your own little research. But you would have to be entrusted with the real, like you say, difficult to acquire down here in BF&E, as they like to call it, back in the day, where it was culturally limited.
And I think, and depending on when you're talking about, it wasn't just Aberdeen necessarily. I mean, I was living down in Northern California is where I grew up.
Mhm.
And, thank goodness I had a friend that, he was into the punk scene. And so he would share albums with
That's,
me,
yeah.
and so I remember he shared, one day I brought home a Dead Kennedys album, and so I'm like, wow, this is really something, it was like, I'd never heard anything like this before. And so, I get out the notebook, and I'm writing down the lyrics, and then I leave to go do something else. I do recall my dad, for some reason, I don't know why, but the notebook sitting on my bed, and he goes through and he reads the lyrics, and I get the beat down when I get home, what is this? And it's just lyrics off of an album, it's just music, but yeah, it was just so foreign for what everybody else was listening to.
Well, and yeah, that's it exactly. It sounds like you had a very similar experience that I had, and I would have that friend for me was